Good evening and welcome to this special meeting of Council for the Tuesday the 11th of August 2020 to hear submissions on the draft General Local Law 2020. Welcome to all, and to start the official proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Jara country, of which the members and elders of the Jara community and their forebears have been custodians for many centuries and have performed age-old ceremony of celebration, initiation and renewal. We acknowledge their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region. Council meetings are audio and video recorded and are made available to the public via electronic media, including YouTube. The Local Government Act, the Act, Part 12, Section 395 of the Act, states that council meetings may be closed to the public during the prescribed period, 1st of May 2020 to the 1st of November 2020, provided it is live streamed. This is to ensure that local government decision making can continue and remains transparent during the coronavirus pandemic. Councillors and council staff are required to continue to act in accordance with the Councillors' Code of Conduct and the Local Government Acts 1989 and 2020, local laws and other acts and policies as prescribed. Where there are technical difficulties in being able to broadcast the meeting to the public, the meeting will be adjourned for 30 minutes until the issue is resolved or postponed to 5 p.m, 18th of August 2020. A recommendation that Council closes the special meeting of Council 11th of August 2020 under the Local Government Act 2020, Part 12, Section 395, and 2, notes that where there are technical difficulties in being able to broadcast the meeting to the public, the meeting will be adjourned to 30 minutes until the issue is resolved or postponed to 5 p.m, 18th of August 2020. Councillors have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
I'll move that that recommendation as read be moved.
Thank you, Councillor Lesser. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Petrusma. I take it there's no objection, so I'll take the matter carried. And I'll now move on and say that I have 7 councillors present, no apologies or leaves of absence. Declarations of interest or conflict of interest for tonight's agenda, councillors? No, thank you. All right, well now I'll move to hearing of submissions on the draft general local law, and we have a recommendation that councillors hear submissions regarding the draft general local law 2020, and notes that a further detailed briefing will be provided at the conclusion of the public consultation process to enable council to consider adoption of a final general local law 2020. So I've read all that out. Maybe another councillor could have moved that, but they will now. Some councillor would like to move that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Cordy. Is it seconded? Thank you, Councillor Machin. Is there any opposition? I sincerely hope not, because that's why we're here. All right, well, in that case, I declare the matter carried. And without any further ado, I think we'll move to the hearing of submissions. Now, do I need an introduction from our officer to say why we're doing this? No, I think we're fine. We have a number of people presenting to us on clause 3, camping on private property. I believe we're expecting to hear from Mr. Schultz, from Mr. Cook-Tonkin, maybe Mr. Laycock and Mr. Scott. And the first cab off the rank is Mr. Schultz. So I will invite him to present to councillors now. Fred, it's over to you. Welcome. Can you hear me? Fred, can you hear me? No. Gussie, are you able to? We're waiting to hear from you, Mr. Schultz.
I can now hear you.
Good, good. Welcome. Welcome to us. And would you like to, we have your written submission. Would you like to speak to it? You're meant to have 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to say how wonderful it is to live in Mount Alexander Shire, because it is a progressive and innovative place to live. And I would like to see this housing provision around a more flexible housing provision that would include tiny houses on wheels, which are caravans, and to have that be an option for people. I would also invite the council to inquire with other councils about what has been done in other councils, specifically Yarra Ranges Council, where they have eliminated the permitting process entirely, and in its place put a nuisance provision. So it says in Yarra Ranges Councils, this is yet to, they're a few weeks ahead of us, so it's unpublished yet, but Emma Brown at Yarra Ranges has made herself available to consult with you and the councillors. This is what they said. They said, an occupier of land must not live in a caravan or allow or suffer any other person to live in a caravan on the land in a manner that causes a nuisance. So what you can hear is they have eliminated the permitting process. There's no longer a permitting process in Yarra Ranges, but all the concerns around safety, sanitation, these are still addressed. And Emma was a very relevant person for me to talk to, because she was talking from inside of a council, and I found what she had to say very important, and I hope that you would seek her out. She said, you know, people can get a permit to do something, but they can still be a nuisance. So by having the nuisance provision, it's sort of an ongoing tap that you have in how things are going. And I think that's very much in a community-minded way, something that I'd like to see. The other thing that I'd like to point out to the councillors is that in this new local law legislation, there is a definition of a caravan, and this is new. We did not have a definition of a caravan in the previous versions of our local laws, and this is what that definition says. A caravan means a vehicle used or adapted for living and designed to be towed by another vehicle, and includes vehicles without wheels or axles, and whether it is resting directly on the ground or on blocks or other supports, and any structure, awning, veranda, lean-to, carport, or other enclosed or partly enclosed areas used in conjunction with the caravan while it is stationary. Now, that kind of makes my head spin a little bit, but you can hear that what they have in what this definition defines is things that are well outside of what we would commonly think of as a caravan, things that are not on wheels and don't have axles. So I just wonder what the reason for that definitional addition was, and if there is a problem, what it's trying to solve. The other point that I would like to sort of address and hope that the council would see as important is there's currently a prohibition against any commercial activity involving a tiny house or a caravan. And I don't know why that is. That is, again, new in the legislation. It hasn't been explained to me why that is, and I would hope that you would make inquiries as to why, what has changed since 2010. If it is, and I can appreciate that in that Airbnb changes the rental market in the community. And if the intent is to not have so much Airbnb in the community, I can understand that. But I think doing away with all commercial activity is a bit of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Is my time up?
Thank you. Yes, I think we can say your time's up.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. Councillors, do we have any questions of Mr. Schultz? He's given us 3 main points. Yes, Councillor Petrusma.
Sorry, just unmuting. Mr. Schultz, can you just clarify the commercial provisions there, which would obviously exclude somebody having a caravan or a tiny house and renting it out as an Airbnb. Are you advocating that we should allow that, or that we shouldn't allow Airbnbs but allow some kind of commercial arrangements where people can rent in a longer term? I'm not quite sure which part you agree with.
personally, I would like to see less Airbnb and more provisions of low cost housing, of which tiny houses could be a part. So I would like to see some commercial activity. If I self-fund my tiny house and I want to have my neighbor, have somebody as my neighbor on my property, I can enter into a rental agreement with them. I'm much more a fan of that than seeing lots of Airbnb. Airbnb, as we know, sort of sucks the life out of a rental market. It reduces the supply of rental housing and the price goes up and doesn't meet the needs of the local community.
Thank you. Any other councillors got questions for Mr. Schultz? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for speaking to us. And you're welcome to stay around, I think, with your vision off, and while and listen to the other presenters. That's of course not in my control, it's under the control of Augustine Shepherd, who is the host for the meeting. So the next person, I think Martine Murray, is an apology. So the next one I'm going to invite in is Rainer Cook-Tonkin. Mr. Cook-Tonkin, I can see a letter R on the screen. Are you?
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? I've just turned my video and unmuted myself.
Yes, I can certainly hear you.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So I've never done anything like this before, but I'm guessing I'm just voicing my concerns and my submission.
Mm-hmm. Yes, good.
Yeah. So yeah, coming out of high school and seeing the tiny house movement has felt sort of liberating in a way, knowing that in our country there's a real housing crisis, and I think seeing this tiny house movement has been an affordable solution to it. And it's not only helping sort of people in my generation and at my age group. I know, for example, Fred has built a house for someone in their retirement. So it's not just accessible to younger, more able people. That's the point I'd like to make. Older retirees can move into such sort of structures. And I think if there is adequate, how do I say this, solutions to grey water and sewage that meet standards, I really can't see a problem with the movement. I can't see any issues with tiny houses. There's obviously engineering issues, but as far as they're built stronger than houses. Like, if people are wanting to move them, they're not wanting them to, break on the road. And I don't think there's ever been an incident of a tiny house, getting destroyed on a road or anything. The one I'm building is built to cyclone standards, so it's really strong. So as far as engineering issues, I think there are general standards out of people's own need to have strength for their house. So that's one thing I'd like to point out. There's talk of trying to regulate them more by going through the Victorian government. I'm not completely knowledgeable on this, but I don't think going down that path is the way to go. I think they're considered caravans by law, and I think that's how they should be considered in a longer term basis. They are caravans, they're registered as caravans, and they're considered caravans. So I think that's the way I'd like it to stay. Yeah, is that my time? Sorry.
That's your time. Yes, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to stop it. Yes.
Okay.
But so you can finish what you're saying without, you know,
But
yeah.
yeah, okay. So with this new proposed law, I guess I can't really understand how decreasing the amount of time people are allowed to live in them addresses any of the actual issues with them. There's no, if it's to do with grey water, if it's to do with sewage, I just really don't understand why decreasing the time people are allowed to live in them is going to affect that. So yeah, and the other thing is, and Fred's already said it, Dandenong, a council in the Dandenong Shire has gone in the opposite way, in a more progressive way. And so I figure if they can do it, why can't we? There's really...
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Mr.
Christine.
Thank you for your time. Councillors, do you
Yeah.
have any questions? Any questions? No? Yes? Dave and Stephen, yeah? Sorry, Councillor Petruska, it's been a long afternoon. Would you like to speak, ask a question?
Sorry, thank you for your submission. You sort of spoke about the quality of tiny houses, which is great, but the law is obviously not meant to, it's meant to cover caravans. So as well as covering tiny houses, it's also covering things, for example, like $500 or $600 old, unregistered, dilapidated caravans. Are you suggesting that we should allow everything, or are you suggesting that we try to separate the two and have different rules for tiny houses as opposed to caravans, even though legally they're deemed to be a caravan?
No, I don't think there should be separate laws for the two. I think it'd get lost in the courts, and I think the movement would sort of end in a way, because yeah, I can't see it being feasible to regulate them differently to a caravan. That's my
Okay,
answer.
okay. Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
Yeah, sure. And it's probably either, I'm not sure if my question is to either Fred or Rainer. I'm just thinking about it then. My question is, I'll start with you, Rainer, is that the bylaws really is about controlling short-term things. So a tiny house which you're going to live in for a couple of months, you know, is fine. But when it becomes a long-term proposition, you need a permit. So what, and there's reasons for that. So what about the permit system is wrong or not right or should be improved to facilitate and support? Because we can't really allow caravans, houses, whatever, to just sort of pop up and stay there forever. Does that make sense in an unregulated market?
Sure.
So my question is, what is the barrier for a tiny house person who wants to get a block of land, either rented or purchased, and put a tiny house on it and apply for a permit so they can live there and stay there forever?
Yeah. Well, the way you put it, it sounds completely logical. I guess concerns with permitting is what kind of ease it is to get permits and what sort, you know, navigating the permit system and how. So it kind of depends how you make this permitting system and how, yeah, the ease of access to people who own tiny houses, and if it's going to be working against them or not. And I guess if it's working for them, I think I'd be fairly optimistic in regards to that.
Thank you. I think Councillor Gardner, if you check the local law that's been out for submissions, I don't think there's any way that you can get a long-term permit. I might be wrong.
No, my question was, if you wanted to live on a house permanently in a tiny house, why wouldn't you go the permit route? And what are the barriers? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I won't I might try and speak with an officer because we're just listening. We're just listening to.
I know, but I'm interested to know, is there a perception that the permit system is against, you know what I mean?
It is.
Well, we don't know what the permit system is, do we? Because it doesn't exist. So
Councillor Cordy.
Just a question for Raina. As you'd appreciate, owners and renters of not normal housing pay various charges, and including local government rates. How would you see people living in, if we were to advocate for tiny houses, how would you see people living in tiny houses contribute to rates or things that would support things like the roads? You're going, you know, if you're living in a tiny house, you're going to use the road, you're going to use the probably use the local library and all sorts of community services that the other ratepayers use. So how would you see occupiers of tiny houses contributing to the general community like everybody else does? Thank you.
yeah, well, that's a great question. I guess what Stephen was saying was like he'd like you to get permits in order to sort of deal with that problem. So from my sense, you're asking almost the same question as Stephen. If there were permits, you would be paying rates? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess long-term, maybe permits would be a good option. It's just how you go about making these permits and whether they're feasible and plausible for people who own tiny houses, or whether it's going to push them out and make it very difficult, if not impossible, to live in them. So yeah, I'm not entirely against the idea of this. It's just I'm against the idea of it sort of ruining the ability to live in a tiny house in the Shire. If it's done well, I don't see a problem with it, with permitting or making us pay rates. Very difficult, if not impossible, to live in them. So yeah, I'm not entirely against the idea of this. It's just I'm against the idea of it sort of ruining the ability to live in a tiny house in the Shire. If it's done well, I don't see a problem with it. With permits.
Councillor Mark, thank you, Raina. That's good. I just need to. Can I just?
The idea of this, it's just I'm against the idea of it sort of ruining the ability to live in a tiny house in the Shire. If it's done well, I don't see a problem.
Thank you, Raina. Thank you, Raina. Thank you for your submission. Can I just read out, for clarity's sake, can I just, councillors, now please, I don't want anyone else speaking at the moment. Thank you, I'm speaking. For clarity's sake, currently in our draft local law, clause 13, part 1, a person must not camp on the property for a period of more than 21 days in any calendar year without a permit. Going down to clause 4, a permit under subclause 1 shall not be granted for a period greater than 6 months unless special circumstances apply. So I think that's the issue that's being addressed by the tiny house people at the moment, Councillor Gardner and other councillors. There's a limit of 6 months on any dwelling called a caravan anywhere. So permit is limited to 6 months. So with that in mind, I will move on to the next presenter, who I believe is Mr. Laycock.
I'm sorry, Mayor Henderson, Mr. Laycock hasn't joined the meeting. We have
Okay.
one other presenter who has joined the meeting, and that's
Yes.
Mr. Trevor Scott.
Lovely. All right, well, we'll hear from him. If Mr. Laycock arrives before the end of the meeting, we might hear him or we might have to move on. We'll see. So, Mr. Scott, would you, are you going to make an appearance?
Oh,
You've
sorry.
unmuted yourself.
Sorry. Can you see me? No.
No, but we will wait. These things take time.
Oh, here I
There
am.
you are. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Uh,
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name's Trevor Scott and I'm a long-time resident of Mount Alexander Shire. Re the proposed changes to the local laws and in particular to section 13, camping on private property, I would like to speak about the merits of tiny houses. Tiny houses are firstly designed and built to building and health regulations, so they are weatherproof and comfortable to live in, and they pose no risks to human health. Secondly, they're designed and built to road traffic regs so that they are movable, they're strong, and they have a minimal footprint. As far as I know, they need a building permit as well as a roadworthy certificate. They also need a planning permit before they can be placed on private property. So I'm an architect with over 40 years experience in the building industry, and I can tell you, as you probably already know, that building is very expensive, up to $2,000 per square metre. And the best way to minimise building costs is to keep the floor plan or footprint as small as possible. That's very logical. Council says it wants to make the Shire a welcoming place for all, and that it encourages innovative housing solutions, i.e. housing which is both sustainable and affordable. At this point in time, it seems that tiny houses are the only building type that fit into this category. The proposed changes in regard to camping appear to be an attempt to exclude tiny houses from the Shire, and in doing so will create hardship for people on pensions and low incomes. I can give you 6 examples of how tiny houses can help people and provide a home for 1, a young person or a couple building a house, 2, an older person or couple, often pensioners with minimal needs, 3, 1 or 2 people who are struggling because one or both have lost their jobs in this difficult time of coronavirus. Number 4, a pensioner who has some space on their property to supplement their income with some rent. And I don't see a problem with rent being charged for a tiny house occupying a medium to a larger size block. Number 5, a person or a couple left homeless after a bushfire or a similar disaster. And number 6, a person, usually a woman, seeking refuge from family violence. Obviously, if you can move this tiny home onto a place where there's somebody already there, that has a measure of security for that person. The current local laws permit people to live or stay in a tent or any portable or other structure providing accommodation. The proposed changes will halve the already short permissible time in which people may occupy a caravan or a tiny house on private property. They are, in my opinion, retrogressive and mean-spirited. Finally, I would say that council has an opportunity here to lead the way out of this pandemic and encourage a form of housing that fits its criteria perfectly. If council adopts this retrogressive bylaw, this opportunity may be lost. So I urge councillors not to vote for these changes to section 13. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Councillors, do you have any questions of Mr. Scott? No, I think you've silenced all of us. All right, well, in that case, you've presented well. You've spoken to your written submission. All councillors have a copy of your written submission. So thank you very much for appearing in person. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I shall call that it. Okay, so now that's all the camping on private property people. And now the next one is removing goods from the property line, which we've had a large number, but we have Mr. Walker presenting. Is he with us?
We don't have Mr. Walker present in the waiting room as yet. He hasn't logged in, and neither has Mr. Laycock at this stage, Ms. Mayor Henderson.
All right. Well, I think I'm not of a mind to hold the meeting open in the chance that they might arrive. They haven't made any contact with you, Gussie, to say they're having difficulties. There's no emails in your inbox.
No, certainly no emails, but I'll double check. Thanks, Mayor. No.
Okay, and no phone calls. I'm sure you gave all your contact details. You're very thorough in that regard. So we have written submissions from both of them. So I think we'll just, councillors will note those and say that in that case we've heard from the submitters, and now I have to find my script to close this meeting, which I think is that that was the business of council that we had to deal with, and there are no other matters scheduled in the agenda, and I've totally lost my script, so I'll say that I shall therefore call this meeting closed at 21 minutes to 7. Thank you.